and so did the prophet Moses. He came with a new law. That's a distinguishing characteristic, that quality that no other prophet had. And once again, I'm not saying that this hadith that I'm looking at over here, I'm not saying that I agree with it. We have to look at the chains of narration in the hadith. That's something that's got to be studied and verified. And just because someone pops up a hadith doesn't mean that that hadith is should be taken as the truth.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to what is this? Vlad, who's doing this? Vlad, have you taken over the room? Vladimir, can you hold on just a second? I'm going to go to Jay. Vladimir, stop that now. Can you Vladimir, stop. Can you hear me? Stop sharing your screen, please. All right, I'm going to have to be the mean guy here. All right.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Jay, go ahead. I'm going to see if I can get.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Kenny, how you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. You're on the hot seat today, so hopefully you don't mind talking. That's a little bit more. All right. Well, thanks for coming with us. And I wanted to ask you about, you said that we're using the same methodology that Jews use when they reject Jesus as the Messiah. You agree that just because someone makes an argument that somebody's in a holy book, that doesn't necessarily make it true, right?
Do what now?
Say someone comes to you from like like an Ahmadi Muslim or something, and he tells you, hey, my prophet, Ghulam Ahmed, is prophesied in the Quran. Would you say that, just because he says that makes it true?
No, of course not.
Right. Okay. So just because a Muslim might claim that Muhammad's in the Bible or something doesn't necessarily make it true. We have to go to the context and see. Now you mentioned a few times that Muhammad doesn't have to be mentioned by name. In the Quran, chapter 61, verse 6, Jesus actually does say that he mentions someone coming after him named Ahmed. So there does seem to be a name criterion there. But let's say you interpret that differently. My question for you is, do you disagree with people like Zakir Naik or Shabir Ali when they say that Muhammad is found by name in Song of Solomon?
No, I don't disagree with him. I do believe he's found by name in Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon. Matter of fact, it says, Hiko matikam wakulo Muhammadim. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, Muhammadim. Yeah, so why do you think that Muhammadim is Muhammad?
Well, just as you mentioned about the I am, in the Hebrew language, I am is added as a sign of respect. So similarly, I am is added to the Prophet Muhammad's name to make it Muhammadan. So in the English translation, it translated the name of the Prophet Muhammad is altogether lovely, but in the Old Testament in Hebrew, the Prophet Muhammad's name is listed as Ahmed, right? Ahmed, Muhammad.
Okay.
So
let me ask you, do you know anything about Hebrew at all? Like able to read it or anything? Any rules or grammar? Okay, well, I just want to let you know that that's actually not the case, that when you find the im ending on a noun, that lets you know that it's not someone's name. We actually don't have examples of that anywhere in the Hebrew Bible where any prophet or anyone is ever mentioned with that im ending. I gave some examples like Solomon. In Hebrew, it's Shlomo. We never find any references of Shlomo im or anything like that. Just doesn't exist in Hebrew. So that's one of the ways we actually know that Muhammadim is not Muhammad, because it has that plural ending.
I find it interesting that you say it's not listed in Hebrew, but if you allow me to share my screen, if Eric will allow me to share my screen, I'll show you that indeed Muhammadim is listed in Hebrew.
Yes, you're right. Muhammadim is mentioned in the Hebrew. I'm saying how we know that's not a personal name is by the fact that it has that im ending. Okay, so Muhammadim just means something that's desirable or something that you want. It's not actually someone's name.
There's many like you'd mentioned, these words in the Hebrew as well as in Arabic and Aramaic, they have multitude of meanings. So to exclude those meanings, I think you might need to do a little more research, and you'll find that you're actually mistaken. You're actually limiting that word to to fit the argument, and that's
actually, you're the one changing the meaning to fit the argument. No dictionary in the world is going to define Mohammedim as the name Muhammad. In fact, no Hebrew lexicon or dictionary in the world will say that. So there's no similarities there apart from them sounding similar. But as I demonstrated, just because something sounds similar in one language doesn't mean it necessarily has that same meaning in the second language.
No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So in the
But
context,
what I'm
we
saying-
know that this is about Solomon's bride describing Solomon.
What I'm saying is that I think you might need to look into the Hebrew a little bit deeper for the meaning of the word Mohammedan.
Yeah. So just to let you know, I know Hebrew. I can read Hebrew. I have Hebrew lexicons and dictionaries, so I don't need to look into it unless you have something that you can recommend me, a source or something. I'll look into that. But I've done plenty of research on it, and I'm telling you, as a matter of fact, that it's not someone's name mentioned there. Mohammedim just simply means something that's desirable or something that's pleasant, something that's coveted.
Okay, well, I've done plenty of research on it as well, and I can tell you that Mohammedan has multitude of meanings that you're limited.
Okay, name two meanings. Name two meanings.
I'm not a Hebrew expert. Okay, so I'm not going to go back and forth with you about Mohammedan.
Okay.
But the fact is that these people would not use this argument. I would not use this argument if it was not a legitimate argument. In the same token, I repeat once again that the same thing could be applied to the prophet Jesus, peace and blessing be upon him, from the same standards. We can make these same arguments, and then where will you guys be? You know, it's so.
Well, we don't make
now
those
we're
same
talking about
claims, right? We don't make the same claims that Muslims make.
Sure you do. Right now, matter of fact, you even make more horrendous claims in claiming that Jesus, peace and blessing be upon him, is the Son of God. He's God.
Okay, well, we had that topic
He's
last week. We were discussing messianic. We were discussing messianic prophecy last week.
Yeah.
Now maybe we'll revisit that another time. We can have that as a topic. You're welcome to come and join us on that. As just to conclude on Song of Solomon, 5:16, you're not going to find any Hebrew scholar in the world that's going to tell you what's a name. The reason why you know it's not a name is because of the im ending and because of the just because of the grammar. Plus, it makes no sense in the context to say his mouth is altogether beautiful. He's entirely Muhammad. He's my friend. He's my dear, O daughters of Jerusalem. So the context is clearly describing, Solomon's bride describing Solomon. Nothing to do with the prophecy of someone named, Muhammad as a prophet.
Well, what you're not considering is that what does the word Muhammad means? It means altogether lovely, right? Altogether lovely.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
It comes from the word hamada. Hamada in Arabic means something that's praised, something that's
once again,
not
like we mentioned, the words in the Arabic have a multitude of meanings. And if you want to try to narrow it down and say just to fit your argument and say that it means one particular thing, then you're defeating yourself in the process. Because if anyone wants to study what the word Muhammad means, you'll see that it has multiple meanings.
Can you give me an example anywhere in the Hebrew Bible or anywhere in the Hebrew language where we have an im ending after someone's personal name, David, Joseph?
No, I'm not a.
Okay, let me say this. Let me ask you this question. Hypothetically, if you were to conclude that we have no other examples of someone's personal name ending in im, would you change your position at all on perhaps this isn't Muhammad mentioned?
Well, it's not necessarily meant to mention the name, but the attribute of the individual in particular. So the name coincides with the attribute. And so those are interchangeable, but the fact is the Hebrew does say Muhammadim, and there's a difference in
vowels. It's Muhammadim.
It doesn't say David. It doesn't say Davidim. It doesn't say Mosesum. It says Muhammad.
Right, exactly.
And so what we're talking about is the quality and the attribute of what that word is implying. And if you look at what it means in the Arabic language, then you'll see that these definitions coincide with one another.
No, they actually don't coincide with one another. In Arabic, it has the meaning of praise. In Hebrew, it has the meaning of pleasant.
Right, that's one of the meanings. The one who's praiseworthy, one who praises, one who's praiseworthy, altogether lovely.
No, nothing about altogether lovely. It's just praise and praiseworthy.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I'm telling you, that's just, I mean, the root hamim dal in Arabic, that's all it means, just praise, nothing to do with something being lovely or desirable. But anyway, I don't think we're going to make any headway on that point, so I'm just going to pass it off. It was nice talking to you, and hopefully we'll see you again
You're
next
very
week or something.
respectful. You're a very respectful young man, so
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Jay, for that. We're going to move over to Veritas Seeker. Veritas hasn't been on here, and then from Veritas, D.L. Tate's had his hand up for quite a while. Veritas, I'm unmuting you now, and then on your hand. Go ahead, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Just two quick little points, and I wanted to go over Isaiah 42 really quick, because that's kind of what I prepared for to come into the room. But, you know, to me, Kenny, and you don't have to answer this, I'm just listening to your conversation, and I'm looking at the Song of Solomon verse, and I think Jay's right about that, to abruptly introduce Muhammad into a context where Solomon's, you know, talking about one of his wives, is just bizarre to me. I just don't see how that would fit at all. Why it was so out of place in context. The other thing was, you know, let me just say this before I discuss Isaiah 42. You mentioned the scriptures being corrupted. I was thinking about Surah 381 and how Christians and Jews were challenged to go to their own scriptures as a basis to judge Muhammad's words. If his words are a confirmation of their previous revelations, then he is to be embraced by a prophet. But I see constantly you're throwing previous revelation under the bus. So to me, that's kind of an enigma to me. And if we do, you know, go by previous revelation, then we're going to have to look at on how passages such as Isaiah 42 is used in Scripture and how it was understood in the New Testament. So that's part of my argument there. But Isaiah 42, 1-7 is quoted in Sahih Bukhari 3, narration 335. And also you mentioned verse 11 in Isaiah 42 about Kedar and Selah. I'm going to mention that in a minute. But starting with verse 1, my servant, here's what the Targums, the various earliest Jewish interpretation of Isaiah 42, and I noticed you did make a distance between Jewish interpretation and Christian interpretation. That's odd to me too as well, because, you know, I know from just studying Judaism for so long that many of the same verses that are applied to the Messiah applied to Jesus by the Christians in the New Testament claiming to be the Messiah are also applied to the Messiah in Jewish writings. In fact, most of them, I would say, that are applied to the Messiah are also applied to Jesus by Christians, are also embraced by Judaism as applying to the Messiah. But here's what Isaiah 42 says in the Targum, and this is by Jonathan ben Uziel, who's a disciple of Hillel, which was, we're talking first century. And it says in Isaiah 42, in the Targum, Isaiah 42, verse 6, I am the Lord, I have exalted you in truth, I have taken you by the hand, and I will establish you and give you as a covenant to people, a light to peoples, to open the eyes of the house of Israel, who are blind to the law. That's an addition, an expansion of the text in the Targum, talking about opening the eyes of Israel, bring out their exiles who resemble prisoners from among the Gentiles, to deliver from the slavery of the kingdoms those who are jailed as prisoners of darkness, underexed by Rabbi David Kimchi of Barbanel. These are all major medieval rabbis, in whom my soul delights. Now, I'm going verse by verse here. It's in my soul delights. This was quoted in Matthew 3 at Jesus' baptism by God, when he says, thou art my son, in whom my soul is well pleased, or in whom my soul delights. So God is quoting, actually the inferences are being quoted from Psalms 2, where the Messiah is called the Son of God, which is clearly a messianic passage, and also Isaiah 42:1, where God is, the Lord is speaking, saying, I put my spirit upon him and my soul delights in him. It's also quoted in the Transfiguration in Matthew 17:5, where God again repeats that, listen to my son in whom my soul delights. He's quoting text, I think, from Psalms 2 and also from Isaiah 42, where the Spirit of the Lord is upon him. Let's go to, let's see. My spirit, okay, I put my spirit upon him. He would bring forth justice to the nations. So that's also part of verse 1. Well, that's messianic through and through in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah 11:2 talks about the Spirit of the Lord being put on the Messiah, and that's clearly a descendant of David who will rule on David's throne. It's also applied to the Messiah in Isaiah 61:1, where the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to proclaim liberty to the captives. Now, Jesus quoted that in Luke chapter 4, verse 16 through 21 of himself. It's also quoted in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Isaiah 61, when Isaiah 61 is quoted in the Dead Sea Scrolls in a messianic context. Justice to the nations. Again, that's a messianic passage. Isaiah 9:1-7. Now, let me see if I can actually quote a little bit of that. You know, bringing justice to the nations was also repeated in Isaiah 9 when Isaiah wrote, before he wrote Isaiah 42, he's writing Isaiah 9, and he said this. He said, there will be no more gloom for her. Now, this is Isaiah 9:1. There will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt. But later on, he shall make it glorious by the way of the sea on the other side of Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in the land, the light will shine upon them. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine upon them. And that's connected to the enthronement part of the declaration that he be enthroned as the king of David, the Davidic king in Isaiah 9:6-7. And it says, for a child will be born to us. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Father of Eternity, Prince of Peace. There will be no end of the increase of his government or peace. So, he also does the same thing. Let me quote Isaiah 11 really quick. And I'm trying to run through this as quick as I can because I know there's probably going to be a lot of questions. I don't have Isaiah 11 up. But if you go to Isaiah 11 and you look at that passage as well, that's understood to be the Messiah bringing justice to the nations. And Isaiah 11 was universally understood to be messianic. So is Isaiah 2:2-4, understood to be a messianic passage that's universal in its scope. Both Jews and Gentiles are going to be partakers of the salvation that the Messiah will bring. Verse 2 and 3 now describes his gentle approach, in his mission. Now, I would hardly think that Isaiah 42:3-4, which says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not grow faint or be discouraged until he establishes justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his law. Now, I'd hardly think this is a militant leader, a king who establishes his kingdom through militancy and force. This is not the implication of these verses. This is a gentle approach that is established by the Messiah. And it's not he isn't military and conquering king. He comes with a gentle, meek, understanding, gentle approach. All right. Let me see. Let's go to verses 6 and 7, where it says he will be a covenant of the people and a light for the Gentiles. Well, covenant of the people is used in Isaiah 49, a few chapters over, referring to Israel, but he will also, like Isaiah 49 says, he will also not only be a covenant to Israel, but he will also be a light to the Gentiles, that God will bring his salvation to the ends of the earth. That was messianic. Hold on just a minute, guys. That was totally messianic. That was also quoted in the New Testament as far as a light of the Gentiles in Luke 2:28-32 by Simeon, who was in the temple when Jesus was brought to the temple as a baby. He recognized that God had revealed the Messiah, and he was waiting for the Messianic kingdom to be revealed. And he said, "I have seen the Messianic kingdom," meaning in the Messiahship of Jesus. He will be a light to the Gentiles, a light to the nations. So he's not just he didn't just come for Israel. He came both for Israel to establish a covenant with Israel and be a light to the nations. And this is quoted throughout the New Testament. The other point, let me see, the other point I was gonna make. Oh, by the way, a covenant to the people, that is what the Messiah brings, okay? That's all through Isaiah. It's in Isaiah 40, 51, 4 through, well, excuse me, it's in Isaiah, hold on just a minute, Isaiah 55, 3, where God will establish an everlasting covenant through the Davidic king. It's in Isaiah 61, 8, where God will establish an everlasting covenant with Israel. That's the same passage that Jesus quoted. And he said, today this scripture is fulfilled in your ears. He was the one who was bringing that covenant. It's in Jeremiah 31 and 32, where the new covenant is described as the everlasting covenant in Jeremiah 32, the next chapter. It's in Ezekiel 16, where the everlasting covenant embraces both Israel and the Gentiles. It's in Isaiah 36 and 37, where the new covenant is described as the everlasting covenant in Ezekiel 37, 26. And also, the Messianic covenant in Hebrews 13:20 is described as the everlasting covenant. So that's a covenant that the Messiah brings to both people, both Jews and Gentiles alike. Now, as far as to opening, this is verse 7, open blind eyes, set free the captives from prison, to release those of the dungeon who sit in darkness, paralleled directly to, so linked together as a description of the Messianic covenant. And remember, Isaiah 42 and 49 was proclaimed by Simeon, claiming that the Messiah had come to be a.
Veritas,
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, brother, but you've given us like a book of information here.
Well, I'm trying to run.
No, I mean, you are just. This is just absolutely priceless in class, and I appreciate it. I like to get Kenny to